Mythology and games go together beautifully. The games I work on are intended to bring a person as active and involved in both the games and in his own life as possible. I always say they're for mature gamers, not because there's blood and guts and sex and curse words, but because they require someone to think and be actively involved. The first big game that I was the designer of was something called Vampire the Masquerade, and we very deeply integrated mythology and Campbell into that game. The idea is that you are this horrendous monster, you are this vampire, but at the same time you have the spark of humanity still within you. So your goal is not to deny what you are, but to reconcile the human, the higher, and the beast, the lower passions, have them work together. Some people talk about this in more Jungian terms of having to deal with your shadow and reconcile your shadow, not suppress it, not give in to it, but have it reconcile with your being. And I've always believed it's a lot more effective when we can work on these experientially, when we can actually experience what happens rather than just read about it in a book. And I've always loved games and found them to be such a wonderful, not only learning tool and pastime, but something that you can actually spark your own passions with, your own mind on things you want to develop. And mythology just lends itself so wonderfully because it is such an expansive view of the world and such a detailed look at yourself as well. The myths that we have in our culture just span the gamut and give us so many ways to look at ourselves and the world around us. When players experience a myth in a game, it can spark all sorts of wonderful things. One thing we always try and push is the idea of edutainment or stealth education, where the idea is that you learn and it's not this dreary, oh, I'm having to learn right now. It's I want to be doing this task and it teaches me along the way. Players, when they encounter a myth within a game, can handle it all sorts of ways. And one of the beautiful things about it is by putting the person into the myth and not having him look at it from outside, he can take it in all new directions and really get a deeper look at the myth. I don't have to necessarily follow the quest for the Golden Fleece the same way Jason did and learn about that lesson of exploration and the driven life that Jason had. I can take it in other ways and see a different perspective on it. And what I find is that most players end up developing their own myth in any game, and it's a wonderful thing to see because they do get a broader look on everything around them. And this is true for role-playing games, even in board games. In Monopoly, people mythologize who they are, what their car is doing going around the board. In computer games, even as simply a computer game as Mall-Tycoon, which is another game I put out, people build themselves a mall. They're a tycoon building a mall, but people really create these detailed scenarios of what they're doing and what their involvement is, and will personalize it as much as possible. And when you give people the ability to do that, they will create their entire new myths, which will tell their own stories and resonate deeply within themselves.